The marriage was never meant to be about love. Princess Kaelira of the Avaran Concord stood inside the great orbital hall, surrounded by glass walls that opened to space itself. Stars stretched endlessly beyond them, cold and distant. Hundreds of representatives from different worlds filled the chamber, their eyes fixed on the two figures at the center. This ceremony was not a celebration, it was a surrender shaped like peace. Kaelira's silver-blue skin shimmered softly under the lights. She wore the royal mantle of her people, heavy with tradition and expectation. Her posture was straight, her expression calm, but inside her chest, her thoughts raced. She had commanded fleets, she had faced enemy fire without fear, yet this moment felt heavier than any battle. Across from her stood the human she was to marry, Elias Ward. He did not wear a crown or royal armor. He wore a simple dark uniform, clean and unadorned, with a small earth symbol over his heart. He stood quietly, hands relaxed at his sides, eyes alert but calm. He looked normal, too normal. Kaelira had studied humans for years through war reports and intelligence files. They were described as relentless, stubborn, and frighteningly adaptable. A species that refused to break, even when outmatched. A species that turned defeat into strategy. But the man before her looked like a diplomat, not a monster. She wondered if this was another human trick. The High Arbiter's voice echoed through the hall, reciting ancient words that bound treaties and bloodlines together. When the final phrase was spoken, a soft chime rang out. The war was over. For 20 years, the Avaran Concord and the Terran Union had fought across dozens of systems. Millions had died. Entire worlds had burned. And now, with a few spoken words and a symbolic union, the galaxy declared peace. Polite applause followed. Holographic recorders hovered closer. Politicians smiled for history. Kaelira felt none of it. She turned her head slightly and met Elias's eyes. They were dark, steady, and surprisingly gentle. "This ends the war," she said quietly, more statement than question. "Yes," Elias replied just as softly. "At least, it should." She studied him. "And if it does not, then we failed," he said. "Both of us." There was no arrogance in his tone, no threat, just honesty. That unsettled her more than anger would have. In the days that followed, Kaelira watched her new husband closely. They traveled together between stations and neutral worlds, appearing at peace summits and reconstruction meetings. Everywhere they went, the attention was intense. Some species watched with hope, others watched with hatred. Elias never seemed bothered. He walked beside Kaelira, never ahead of her, never behind. When she spoke, he listened. When humans addressed him, he redirected questions to her when appropriate, showing clear respect for her authority. This was not how Avaran nobles behaved. On her homeworld, power was shown through dominance. Even allies tried to assert control. Elias did none of that. At formal gatherings, he spoke only when necessary. His words were careful and measured. He did not boast about human victories or losses. He spoke about rebuilding, about shared borders, about preventing future bloodshed. Many Avaran officials were suspicious. "He hides his claws," one commander whispered. Kaelira had begun to think the same. At night, they stayed in separate quarters. That alone shocked the court. An elder finally confronted him. "The treaty allows you full marital claim," the elder said cautiously. Elias shook his head. "Peace forced is not peace. I won't start our future with fear." Kaelira overheard that exchange from the corridor. She did not know what to make of it. Still, despite his behavior, she could not forget the history. Humans did not survive their wars by kindness alone. Something lay beneath the calm surface. Something dangerous. She wondered when she would see it. The answer came sooner than expected. The neutral trade station Heliox Prime floated near the edge of contested space. It was meant to be safe ground, protected by multiple treaties. Kaelira and Elias were there to finalize humanitarian corridors for displaced civilians. Everything seemed normal. Then the alarms screamed. The station shook violently as an explosion tore through an outer docking ring. Lights flickered. Gravity faltered for a brief, terrifying second. Kaelira steadied herself, instincts taking over. "Report," she demanded. A security officer rushed in. "Unidentified attackers. Internal breach. They are heading this way." Before Kaelira could issue further orders, another explosion rocked the corridor. The blast threw guards against the walls. Smoke poured in, thick and burning. Through the haze, armored figures emerged. Avaran extremists. Their black warplates were marked with old symbols of conquest. Their weapons were already raised. The leader stepped forward, his voice filled with rage. "Princess Kaelira, you sold our honor to a human." Kaelira reached for the energy blade at her side. "You threaten peace," she said coldly. "Stand down." They laughed. "You are already dead." Before Kaelira could move, Elias stepped in front of her. She stared at him in shock. "Elias." No, he did not look back. The first plasma shot fired. Time seemed to slow. Elias moved just as the bolt passed where his head had been. He rolled across the floor, grabbed a fallen weapon, and fired in one smooth motion. 2 attackers dropped instantly. Kaelira froze, unable to look away. The man she thought she knew disappeared. Elias advanced into the smoke with frightening focus. His movements were precise, almost calm. He used cover instinctively, firing only when necessary. When his weapon overheated, he discarded it without hesitation and took another. The extremists rushed him, thinking numbers would win. They were wrong. Elias closed the distance, turning their strength against them. He struck armor joints, disabled weapons, and moved constantly, never giving them time to react. To Kaelira, it looked unreal. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest. But Elias fought with perfect timing and relentless control, like gravity pulling everything toward him. One attacker broke through and charged Kaelira. Before she could raise her blade, Elias appeared between them. He caught the descending weapon with his bare hand. The energy burned his skin, but he did not let go. He drove his elbow into the attacker's chest with crushing force, sending him crashing into the wall. The corridor fell silent. Smoke drifted slowly. Broken weapons lay scattered across the floor. Elias stood there, breathing heavily, blood running down his arm. His hand trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from effort, like something powerful held tightly inside. He turned to Kaelira. "Are you injured?" he asked. She could barely speak. "No." Security teams rushed in moments later, weapons raised. They stopped when they saw the scene. The threat was over. As medics treated Elias's burned hand, Kaelira stared at him, her mind racing. This was the truth of humanity. Not loud brutality. Not blind rage, but controlled violence, used only when needed. She understood then why humans were feared. They did not fight for glory. They fought to protect, and she had married one of their brightest, most dangerous stars, still burning, even when he tried to hide his light. The aftermath of the attack spread across the galaxy faster than the explosion itself. Security footage from Heliox Prime was leaked within hours. Different angles showed the same thing. A human diplomat stepping in front of an alien princess, then moving through armed attackers, like a force of nature. Analysts replayed the footage frame by frame. Military experts argued. Civilians watched in stunned silence. The war was over, yet everyone was asking the same question. What had Kaelira married? Princess Kaelira sat in the quiet medical wing of the station, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Across from her, Elias lay on a recovery bed, while automated systems treated the burns on his hand and the bruises along his ribs. He looked smaller now, human, tired, not like the unstoppable figure she had seen in the corridor. "You should not have done that," she said at last. Elias opened his eyes and looked at her. "Which part?" "Stepping in front of me," she replied. "You were not required to." "I was," he said simply. "You were my responsibility." Kaelira frowned. "By treaty. By choice," Elias corrected. That answer stayed with her. When they returned to the Avaran capital world, the atmosphere had changed. Crowds gathered outside the landing platform. Not to celebrate, but to stare. Some bowed. Some turned away. Some looked afraid. A few extremists shouted accusations before being silenced by guards. Inside the palace, the High Council waited. Kaelira stood tall as she faced them, but she could feel their judgment pressing down on her. Elias stood at her side, calm as ever. "You endangered the peace," one counselor accused. "Your presence provoked the attack." Elias spoke before Kaelira could respond. "The attackers were extremists who rejected the treaty. They would have acted regardless. And yet you killed Avarin soldiers," another said sharply. "I stopped a threat," Elias replied. "There is a difference." The room grew tense. Kaelira raised her hand. "Enough. I was there. If not for Elias, I would be dead." The peace would be broken already. Silence followed. Some counselors looked uncomfortable. Others, thoughtful. The eldest among them finally spoke. "Princess, do you trust this human?" Kaelira hesitated. Then she said, "Yes." She surprised herself with how certain she sounded. Later that night, Kaelira found Elias alone on a balcony overlooking the city. Twin moons hung low in the sky, casting pale light over towering spires and glowing streets. "You fought like a trained soldier," she said quietly. "Not like a diplomat." Elias did not turn. "I was a soldier." Her breath caught. "You never told me. You never asked." She stepped closer. "Who were you?" Elias rested his hands on the railing. "I served in the Terran Defense Forces. Special operations, border conflicts, counter-invasion response." Kaelira had read those terms in reports. They usually meant brutal battles and high casualties. "Why leave?" she asked. "Because I was good at it," Elias said. "And because being good at war doesn't mean you should live in it forever." She studied his face. There was no pride there, only memory. "You are dangerous," she said. "Yes," he agreed calmly. "But I choose when to be." That answer scared her more than any threat. The galaxy did not give them time to rest. Within days, intelligence reports confirmed what Elias had suspected. The Heliox attackers were not alone. A coalition of extremist factions, Avarin, allied species, and even rogue humans were uniting. They believed peace weakened the galaxy. They wanted war to return. Their target was clear. If they could kill Kaelira, or force her to denounce the treaty, the fragile peace would collapse. The High Council argued for isolation. Human advisors pushed for joint security. Tension filled every meeting. Finally, Kaelira made a decision. "We face this together," she declared. "Avarin and human forces. No secrets." Some protested. Others agreed. Elias said nothing. Later, alone, she asked him, "Do you think it will work?" "It has to," he replied. "They're testing us. If they see division, they'll strike harder." She nodded slowly. "Then we show unity." The first real test came on the edge of the neutral zone. A refugee convoy, mixed species, mostly civilians, was ambushed by extremist ships. Avarin escorts were overwhelmed and called for help. The nearest response fleet was human. Kaelira watched the live tactical feed from the command deck of her flagship. Elias stood beside her, eyes fixed on the data streams. "Human ships are moving too fast," one Avarin officer muttered. "They'll overextend." Elias shook his head. "They're not charging. They're positioning." Kaelira leaned forward as the display changed. Human vessels split apart, not into a single attack line, but into layered formations. Smaller ships darted ahead, drawing fire. Larger cruisers stayed back, adjusting vectors constantly. The extremists fired wildly, confident in their numbers. Then the humans struck, not with overwhelming force, but precision. Communication nodes were disabled. Engines were crippled. One by one, enemy ships lost coordination. Panic spread through their ranks. Avarin forces regrouped and joined the fight, striking where humans had created openings. The battle ended quickly. Minimal casualties. Civilians saved. The bridge was silent. "They didn't annihilate them," an Avarin commander said slowly. "They dismantled them." Elias finally spoke. "That's how humans fight when we want a future." Kaelira felt something change inside her. This was not the reckless violence her people feared. This was restraint guided by purpose. That night, Kaelira stood alone in the quiet observation chamber. The stars outside seemed closer than before. Elias joined her. "You could have ruled alone," she said. Elias considered the question. "Because peace treaties are fragile. They need symbols people can believe in. And me? You're more than a symbol," he said. "You're brave enough to choose peace, even when it costs you." She looked at him then. Truly looked at him. Not as a human, not as a weapon, but as a man who carried war inside him and still chose not to let it rule him. "You shine when you fight," she said softly. "Like a falling star." Elias met her gaze. Stars fall so something else can rise. For the first time since the ceremony, Kaelira felt something she had not expected. Hope. But far away, in the darkness between systems, the extremists watched the same battle footage, and they began planning something far worse. The peace did not break all at once. It cracked slowly, like ice under rising pressure. Across the galaxy, small incidents began to appear. Supply convoys vanished. Communication relays failed. Border patrols reported strange signals, and silent ships drifting with no crews aboard. Each event alone could be explained away. Together, they formed a pattern. Someone was preparing for war. Princess Kaelira stood inside the war strategy chamber of her flagship, staring at the glowing star map. Red markers blinked along trade routes and neutral systems. Too many, too organized. "They're pushing us," she said quietly. "Testing how far they can go." Elias stood beside her, arms crossed, his expression hard. "They're also baiting us." Several Averin commanders looked uneasy. "Baiting us into what?" "A mistake," Elias replied. "If either side overreacts, the treaty collapses. That's what they want." Kaelira exhaled slowly. "Then we don't give it to them." The extremists made their move 3 days later. A joint Averin-human peace summit was scheduled on the station Lyris Gate, a massive hub that controlled jump access between key systems. Dozens of diplomats were already en route. The summit was meant to prove that cooperation worked. Instead, it became a trap. As Kaelira's fleet approached the station, alarms sounded across multiple ships. "Station defenses are turning hostile," an officer reported. "Internal systems compromised." Elias's jaw tightened. "They're hijacking Lyris Gate." Kaelira's eyes widened. "If they control the jump core, they can strand fleets, isolate systems." Elias finished. "Or turn the station into a weapon." The extremists were not just attacking, they were trying to rewrite the balance of power. Chaos erupted inside Lyris Gate. Saboteurs struck power nodes, releasing security drones and sealing bulkheads. Diplomats were trapped. Panic spread through civilian sectors. Kaelira led an emergency command team through the station's upper ring, directing evacuations and restoring order where she could. Her voice was calm, steady. The voice of a leader who refused to yield to fear. Elias moved differently. He was quiet, focused, every sense sharp. "This is too clean," he said as they advanced through a dim corridor. "They planned this for months." A wounded station officer staggered toward them. "They knew our codes," he gasped. "Someone helped them." That hit Kaelira harder than any explosion. Betrayal. Before she could respond, gunfire echoed ahead. The corridor filled with smoke and sparks. Extremists poured out from side passages. Elias reacted instantly. "Stay behind me." "No," Kaelira said, activating her blade. "Beside you." For a brief second, he looked at her, really looked at her, then nodded. They fought together. Kaelira moved with practiced precision, her strikes clean and controlled. Elias covered her blind spots, firing only when needed, pulling her out of danger without hesitation. They were not just allies, they were a unit. Still, the numbers kept coming. "They're hurting us," Kaelira realized. Toward the core, Elias's expression darkened. "Then that's where this ends." Deep within the station, the jump core chamber glowed with unstable energy. Massive rings spun slowly, held in check by failing containment fields. At the center stood the extremist leader. He was Averin, older, his armor marked with symbols of the old empire. His eyes burned with conviction. "You see, Princess?" he said as Kaelira and Elias entered. "Peace makes us weak. Humans will replace us, rule us. Kaelira stepped forward. You're destroying everything you claim to protect. No, he snarled. I am saving it. He gestured, and a hologram flared to life. Human war footage, burning worlds, fallen fleets, soldiers advancing through impossible odds. Look at them, the extremist continued. This is what you married. A weapon species. Elias said nothing. Kaelira glanced at him, then back at the hologram. Yes, she said. Humans are dangerous. The extremist smiled. Then you understand. They are dangerous. Kaelira continued, her voice rising. Because they survive. Because they adapt. Because even after all this, they choose peace. The smile vanished. Elias finally spoke. You think war defines us? War was what almost destroyed us. Peace is what we fight for now. The extremist laughed bitterly. You can't escape what you are. Elias took a slow breath. No, he said. But I can choose what I become. The extremist triggered the final protocol. The jump core began to overload. Alarms screamed. Energy surged through the chamber. If the core collapses, Kaelira shouted over the noise, it will tear this entire sector apart. Elias was already moving toward the control platform. I can stabilize it manually. Kaelira grabbed his arm. That will kill you. Maybe, he said calmly. But it will save everyone else. She felt something tighten painfully in her chest. No, she said firmly. We find another way. There isn't time. She met his eyes. You told me peace begins with trust. He hesitated. Trust me, she said. Elias nodded once. Kaelira turned to the control interface, her hands flying over unfamiliar systems. Divert the energy surge through auxiliary rings, she ordered. Human ships can absorb the backlash. Elias understood instantly. Human shields, layered, they'll take the hit. Can they survive it? An officer shouted over the comm. Elias's voice was steady. They will. Outside the station, human and Avaran fleets moved as one. Human cruisers repositioned around Lyris Gate. Their shields flaring brighter and brighter as energy surged outward. Systems screamed warnings. Hulls groaned. But they held. The jump core stabilized. The station lived. Inside the chamber, the extremist stared in disbelief as his plan failed. This changes nothing, he hissed. There will always be war. Kaelira stepped forward, blade humming softly. Not today. He was taken into custody moments later. The cost was not small. Several human ships were badly damaged. Crews were injured. Systems would take months to repair. But no world burned. No sector was lost. In the aftermath, the galaxy watched again. They saw humans absorb a catastrophic energy surge to save civilians who were not their own. They saw Avaran commanders fight side by side with former enemies. They saw restraint where destruction was expected. Narratives began to change, slowly. Later, in the quiet of the medical bay, Kaelira found Elias sitting alone. You were ready to die, she said softly. Yes, he admitted. Old habits. She sat beside him. Next time, we live together. He looked at her, surprised. Then he smiled. Deal. Outside the viewport, the stars burned steadily, no longer falling, just watching. But far beyond known space, others watched too. Those who had not yet revealed themselves, and they were not finished. The galaxy held its breath after Lyris Gate. For the first time in decades, former enemies had survived a disaster by trusting each other. News channels replayed the footage endlessly, human ships glowing under impossible strain. Avaran commanders shouting orders beside Terran officers, civilians evacuating safely. Hope spread, so did fear, because hope made enemies desperate. Princess Kaelira stood before the joint council chamber, watching delegates argue across a circular table. The room was filled with tension. Not anger, but something sharper: uncertainty. The extremists are wounded, not destroyed, one delegate warned. They lost their leader, another replied. But not their belief, a human admiral added calmly. Elias stood behind Kaelira, silent as always in council, his presence steady. He had returned to his role as diplomat, But the galaxy no longer saw him as just that. To many, he was proof of what humans truly were. Kaylira raised her hand. The room quieted. "They want us afraid," she said. "They want us divided. If we respond with suspicion, we give them exactly what they seek. And if we respond with trust," someone asked. Kaylira met their gaze. "Then we change history." The final strike came not as an attack but as a threat. A massive extremist fleet emerged near the Karos Rift, a region dense with inhabited worlds. Their message was broadcast across all channels. "End the treaty. Withdraw humans from joint command, or the rift burns." Panic spread instantly. Karos held billions of lives. Military leaders demanded immediate action. Some argued for preemptive strikes, others urged evacuation. The room fractured into shouting voices. Kaylira felt the weight of every life pressing down on her. Then Elias spoke. "They don't want a battle," he said evenly. "They want us to choose fear." Several eyes turned to him. "They expect us to strike hard and fast," Elias continued. "To prove every lie they've told about humans right." Kaylira understood. "They want us to become the monster," she said. "Yes," Elias replied. "So let's do something they can't predict." The joint fleet moved toward the Karos Rift. But not in attack formation. Human and Avaran ships traveled openly. Weapons cold. Shields lowered to minimum safe levels. Broadcast arrays were active, sending one message on repeat. "We are here to protect, not to conquer." On the extremist flagship, commanders watched in disbelief. "They're bluffing," one snarled. "They'll strike." But they didn't. Instead, Kaylira and Elias boarded a single unarmed shuttle and flew straight toward the enemy fleet. Every sensor locked onto them. "This is madness," an extremist officer shouted. "No," the leader said quietly. "This is courage." The shuttle docked. Kaylira stepped onto the hangar floor first, her posture proud and unyielding. Elias followed at her side. Unarmed, eyes clear, they were surrounded instantly. "You are brave," the extremist commander said, circling them. "Or foolish." "Bravery and foolishness often look the same to those who fear change," Kaylira replied. The commander turned to Elias. "Human, your kind survives war better than anyone. Why deny what you are?" Elias met his gaze. "Because survival alone is not enough." The commander laughed. "You think peace will last? Someone will always strike first." "Yes," Elias said. "And that's why humans learned something important." "What?" the commander sneered. Elias's voice did not rise. It did not threaten. "We learned that true strength is choosing restraint when you have the power to destroy." Silence spread through the hangar. "You call that strength?" the commander asked. Elias nodded. "Because it's harder than war." The extremists activated their final weapon, a chain reaction device hidden within the rift, designed to destabilize the region's stars. If triggered, entire systems would collapse. "You cannot stop it," the commander said. "Even now, the countdown runs." Kaylira closed her eyes for one brief moment. Then she opened them. "You're wrong," she said. Elias tapped his wrist console. Across the rift, human ships moved not to attack, but to intervene. Engineers rerouted power. Scientists calculated impossible solutions in seconds. Avaran navigators adjusted gravity fields with precision born of centuries. Human adaptability met alien mastery. Together, on the extremist bridge, alarms began to change tone. Energy disruption detected. Star instability decreasing. "They're fixing it?" The commander stared at the displays, stunned. Elias spoke softly. "Humans don't just learn how to fight. We learn how to fix what's broken." The device was neutralized. The rift stabilized. Billions of lives were saved without a single shot fired. The extremist fleet stood frozen, surrounded by joint forces that still had not fired. Kaylira stepped forward. "This ends now." The commander looked at her, at Elias, at the combined fleet beyond the hangar doors. For the first time, his certainty cracked. He gave the order to stand down. The aftermath reshaped the galaxy. The extremist movement collapsed without its final threat. Worlds once fearful of humanity now requested alliances. Joint academies were formed. Shared fleets patrolled borders once soaked in blood. The treaty was no longer fragile. It was real. On a quiet evening months later, Kalyra stood with Elias on the balcony of the rebuilt Heliox Prime. Stars glittered peacefully. No alarms. No fires. You never became what they feared, Kalyra said. Elias smiled faintly. Neither did you. She looked at him. This marriage began as a weapon, and became a promise, he said. Below them, children of multiple species watched human engineers repair a damaged transport, laughing as they worked together. Kalyra rested her hand over Elias's. You fought like a fallen star, she said. Bright. Terrifying. And falling stars burn up, Elias replied. But the light they leave behind helps others find their way, she smiled. In a galaxy once ruled by fear, humanity had done the unthinkable. They had won, not by conquering worlds, but by choosing to protect them, and that was why the stars would remember humans not as monsters of war, but as guardians who refused to let the darkness win.